Night before TradeCentre might be the busiest night of the year for the insiders, but it also means you guys are like 21 hours from phone freedom, at least for a few days. And mail it in March, as Bobby always used to call it.
Correct.
So that's something to look forward to. Top of this, the Leafs, who are now officially sellers as Nick Roy goes to Colorado. So the next question becomes, who is next and how many will be next? And I guess we start with Bobby McMann.
Yeah, Bobby McMann, obviously a pending UFA and a very good contract for another team out there looking to add someone of his caliber. The Leafs can still go both ways here, I think, and really it is an either-or proposition for them. They have continued to have dialogue with his agents about what an extension might look like. In his favor was the fact that Kiefer Sherwood signed the 5-year deal he did this week in San Jose. That AAV was at $5.75 million. Won't take quite that much to get McMann done. I think the Leafs would like to keep him in the fours. And if not, he could be a piece that brings him back. If not a first-round pick, perhaps 2 second-round picks.
Yeah, I mean, the three players that we're watching most closely now, Bobby McMann, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Scott Laughton, right? And the thing that all three of those men have together is they all want to stay in Toronto. And so when I look at Oliver Ekman-Larsson, of course there's interest. There's a high level of interest around the National Hockey League. He wants to stay in Toronto. He's got limited trade protection, so that is an issue from his perspective. But you can also appreciate why Brad Treliving would be listening to all of the interest in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. You just hit the home run in getting a first-round pick and a fifth-round pick for Nick Roy to the Colorado Avalanche. So what is the expected return for Oliver Ekman-Larsson? Minimally, it's got to be a first and a second. So that's why you listen.
But the players' desires, which we sometimes overlook in all these rumors, and we've learned how important that is in the Colton Parayko situation, where you have this awkward situation where the trade was done and reported between Buffalo and St. Louis, but the trade wasn't done because the player involved didn't want to go to Buffalo. So where does that leave Parayko? Where does that leave the Blues?
Yeah, and the Blues have dominated the news cycle of the last couple of days between Parayko and Robert Thomas. When it comes to Parayko, the Buffalo Sabres needed an answer from him. And listen, my understanding from talking to someone in the middle of all this, the Sabres were great about this, Jarmo Kekalainen. They understood that Colton Parayko, this was a difficult decision for him. But they also put a bit of pressure on there on this day to say, we need an answer because we need to pivot if you're not coming to us. And so Colton Parayko said, well, if you need an answer, it's going to be no, because I'm just not there right now in terms of accepting this trade. So it's a no. Parayko is still with the St. Louis Blues. And whether or not another team puts an offer in front of St. Louis in time for him to make up his mind between now and tomorrow, I think is doubtful, but it's possible. Robert Thomas, it's been very quiet today, I'm told, within the Robert Thomas situation. Utah is ready to jump back in. I think Utah believes it still has the best package available to the St. Louis Blues for Robert Thomas, but at this point in time, I'm told it's status quo, the Robert Thomas situation.
Well, on the Buffalo end of this is interesting, too, guys, because they tried on Thomas earlier in the week. They obviously were trying to get Parayko done, and they've ended up so far with neither of them, but obviously having a great season. And so I would still expect them to be big players in some way, shape, or form by the deadline. We know they, like Detroit, they share a lot in common, trying to end their long playoff losing streaks. Both have tried on right shot Ds that didn't end up with Detroit trying to get Tyler Myers earlier in the week. So I could see them bidding on some of the same players and still wonder maybe Erasmus Ristolainen reunion in Buffalo, although the prices there are pretty high because there's a lot of teams involved with Philadelphia.
Calgary back in the game. Mackenzie Weegar goes to Utah, and they continue to pile up draft picks. Zach Whitecloud, Blake Coleman, will they likely follow?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope of the market, but that may not be the expectation of the Calgary Flames. When you look at Blake Coleman, you look at Zach Whitecloud, both these men are high-character individuals. And look, I mean, Calgary is selling. There's no doubt about that. But they're not throwing in the towel moving forward. They want to keep good competitive players. And if you look at Zach Whitecloud, they've got all the time in the world, especially for him, because they've got a young D that he'd be perfect mentoring for. So Whitecloud available, yes, but Calgary needs to be blown away, and I would say the same with Coleman.
Yeah, and the Montreal Canadiens with ties to the Calgary Flames they have for weeks because we talked about Nazem Kadri. First of all, on Kadri, I don't think Montreal can get deep into a Kadri conversation once and for all unless the Calgary Flames are ready to retain salary on those 3 years left at $7 million. I don't know if Calgary wants to do that. Number two, you mentioned Whitecloud. That's a player of interest to the Montreal Canadiens. They'd like to get a right shot D. They were in on Connor Murphy, didn't get him. They're looking at a few right shot D as well. What I will say on Montreal at the end of the day, whether it's Robert Thomas or other players, they don't want to force a trade just for the sake of saying they made a trade by tomorrow. They're a young team. They're just starting their window. It has to be right for them. They're okay not doing anything.
Drake's broke that Warren Fogle trade on overdrive, so the Sens get involved here.
Interrupted me.
I did. Sorry.
Just like you with him.
So rude. So Sens are 6 points out of a playoff spot, so it's rare that you see a hardcore buyer in that position, but they have a really good hockey team. Do we see more from Ottawa?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know if I call them a hardcore buyer, but they feel like they have a team that can still make a push here for the playoffs. And obviously, it's getting tougher as they get by, and they're losing points along the way. But, you know, you look at a lot with their team, I think they do feel they can get in. And Fogel's an interesting case. He's had a tough season in L.A. He wanted a fresh start there, but last year was really good for him. And a middle six winger who can kill some penalties. You know, it's a buy low kind of candidate. I like the move for the Senators, and we'll see if they can come up with anything else by tomorrow.
And finally, two other stops out west, Winnipeg and Vancouver. We know Vancouver's in full rebuild mode. We don't exactly know what the Jets are going to do.
Well, both teams seem to be caught in the logjam, right? So we need to see how things transpire and develop as the night progresses and then leading up to the deadline tomorrow. When you look at the Winnipeg Jets, I mean, mostly we're looking at Logan Stanley. And, you know, he's a coveted defenseman, but for Winnipeg to consider trading him, even though there's a contract issue there in terms of an extension, they've got to get a fair offer. And right now, that just hasn't happened. Could it materialize when some of the other D go? Yes, probably. Vancouver in that waiting mode on Evander Kane, Teddy Bluger expected to go, maybe Drew O'Connor. But again, it's all part of the number of players that remain in the game.
So that's where we stand on Thursday evening. There'll likely be significant changes by the time we go to bed on Thursday night.